Hey there, I'm Chef Gale Gand. Thanks so much for coming to cook with me in my kitchen today. I'm going to make one of my favorite recipes. I'm going to make peanut butter dog biscuits. And feel free to cook along with me if you want to. We only need 6 ingredients: some whole wheat flour, some peanut butter, I've got a little bit of oat bran here, some pumpkin puree, a couple eggs, and some bacon fat. So the first thing I'm going to do is just put my paddle attachment on my mixer, get that bowl up, and now you can go ahead and put all the wet ingredients in. So first the pumpkin puree is going to go in. That's 2/3 of a cup of pumpkin puree. I've got organic here, but it doesn't have to be organic. I'm going to go ahead and add a 1/4 cup of peanut butter. This is creamy peanut butter. I mean, unless you really like chunky and like texture in your dog biscuits, but I use the creamy kind. Now I'm going to break 2 eggs into that, just large size eggs. That's sort of when chefs say 2 eggs, they mean large size, okay? And the last thing is 3 tablespoons of bacon fat. Now if you don't have that, you can leave it out, or if you've got chicken fat in the house like schmaltz, you can add that as well. Just give some extra flavor and extra lusciousness. Now go ahead, mix all those ingredients together. And the last 2 things we need are 2½ cups of whole wheat flour, and then I add a 1/2 cup of oat bran, or if you've got wheat bran or wheat germ or like one other grain, one other kind of flour, so that they're not just whole wheat. So go ahead, I like to lower my bowl when I'm adding dry ingredients. So I'm adding 2½ cups of flour, 1/2 cup of oat bran, and then I'm going to mix that till it comes together. And it shouldn't be too sticky. So if it is a little sticky still after you mix it on low, you can always add a little bit more flour. But then we are going to knead it on the workbench a little bit, so you can work in some flour if you really, really need to, if you find that it's a little too sticky. So let me show you what this looks like. That's the texture that it's going to be. And if I grab some of it with my hand, it definitely sticks together. It holds together, but it's not sticky and sticking to my hand. So that's perfect. All right, let's clear a little space so we can roll this out. The other things you are going to need are a dog biscuit cutter, a fork, spatula is nice, and then a rolling pin. So have those handy, plus a sheet pan with a little bit of parchment paper on it. And you want to preheat your oven to 350 degrees. So I just sprinkle a little bit of flour on my work surface. Let's go ahead and turn out this dough and then knead it maybe, just like 7 or 8 times, just to bring it together, to make sure all the moisture is evenly distributed. And then when I roll the dough out, I actually work with half of it at a time, because it's a little bit big. Oh, I see a question's coming through on the chat there. Mia asks, can I add catnip to it? Yes, you could. You could really add any herb that you want, that you like. So sure, catnip could be one of those. All right, so I'm bringing this together by kneading it, working a little more flour into it, and trying to get the top kind of smooth. There we go. That looks good to me. So I've got a nice sort of ball of dough here. I'm going to split this in half just so it's a little easier to work with, and then I can roll the second half later. So make this into a nice little ball. Make sure you've still got some flour on your surface there. And now I'm going to roll them out and cut them into dog biscuit shapes. All right. Oh, it looks like another question's coming through on the chat. Bianca asks, can you store it in a container with an easily opening lid? So a lid that you can open easily. Once you've cut these out and bake them off, yes, you can store them in whatever container you've got, as long as it's airtight. That's the main thing, because you don't want them to get soggy. You want them to stay pretty dry once you've baked them. So absolutely. Who was it, Bianca? Absolutely, you can store it in something with an easy open lid, is what she asked. All right, so I'm rolling this dough out about a 1/4 inch thick, and I can see that oat bran in it. The texture looks great. So keep your dough notice how I kind of turn it once in a while. Make sure there's still flour under it. Make sure it's not sticking to your work surface. And that's why I kind of turn it, but also that helps keep it sort of flatter and more even as you roll. Kind of give it a spin, that way you're rolling in different directions. So if they do shrink a little during baking, they're going to shrink back in many directions, not just one. Okay? So once you've got it rolled out to about 1/4 inch thick, get your biscuit cutter. And you don't have to do a dog bone shape, but I find that that's sort of traditional. But feel free to use whatever you want. So I'm just going to go ahead and cut out as many of these as I can. There we go, just cut that out. And I've actually got some here that I made a little earlier. So let's just add to these. I need like 3 more to complete the pan. And I do space them about 1 inch apart. That way if they spread a little bit during baking, they're not gonna, you know, stick and run into each other. Just get 1 more on there. Another question's coming in from Lucy. Lucy wants to know how many can she have in a seating or per sitting. You know, Lucy, that's really up to your household how many of things like this you're allowed to eat. So I'm just going to leave that up to you guys at home, okay? So here's what they look like cut out. I'm going to take a fork though and mark them a little bit, you know, just put some holes in them so they look a little more authentic, but also those holes help air escape as they bake so they don't puff up. So it helps keep them flatter. I don't know if you can see this, I've just kind of marked it with a fork right down the center. There we go. And now that's it really. I'm going to bake these at 350 degrees for about 25 minutes, depending on how accurate your oven is. So I'm going to say 20 to 30, but it ends up being about 25 minutes. And when they come out of the oven, here's what they look like. These are the finished dog biscuits. They turn kind of yellow, but they look great. One more question's coming through. Teddy asks, can I grind these up? Can you grind them up into kibble? I mean, I guess if you want to, if they're, you know, a little too big for you and you want smaller pieces, sure. You could, you know, cut them up into kibble or break them up into kibble. Let me break one and see how. Yeah, they'll break up just fine. So that's what they look like. That's how they come out. Does anybody else have any questions?